Welcome to Beyond Words Presents. I'm your host, Whitney Diffenderfer, and this week I am here with Tami Lynn Kent. She is the award-winning author of Wild Feminine, and she has just released her newest book in her Wild series called Wild Creative. I have a copy of it here. It's just so gorgeous. I love showing the cover. And she is here to give us a whole new perspective on creativity. It's a popular topic now, but the way Tami talks about it is completely different. So welcome to the show, Tami.
Thanks, Whitney. Glad to be here.
I'm so excited to have you on the show and chat with you about all these things because I always, the way that you talk about things is so different. Every time I hear you share about them, I learn something new. So I'm thrilled to be here with you. And just so everybody out there who is watching knows, you can also participate in the conversation. You can use the Google Hangouts app to submit a question, and be sure to subscribe to our channel on YouTube, like us on Facebook, and follow us on Twitter. So please send in your questions if you have any for Tami. But my first question, Tami, is how is your impression, your understanding of creativity different than there's probably 50 new books coming out a day or a week on creativity, and how is yours different?
Right. Yeah, I think creativity is really a hot topic right now just because it's so needed. The linear pathways are no longer working quite as well. The predictable, I'm going to go to school, I'm going to get my profession, I'm going to work through my professional goals, and it will get me A, B, and C. So I think people are really being called to deepen into creativity. And the way I see creativity, that I think is probably different than anyone else I've heard talking about it, is that as an energy reader and as a healer, I look at people's creative fields as the energetic capacity that they have. And every single person has a vibrant, creative, energetic field that they were born with. And sometimes I think because we have narrow definitions of creativity, maybe we don't actually even understand that every single person has this incredible creative potential right in their center. So one of the things I work with as a healer and then begin to translate as an author, because I'm also curious about this for myself, for all I do as a businesswoman, in my practice, in my daily life, in balancing my life as a mother of 3 boys. I use that creativity a lot, and so in Wild Creative, I went to translate how do you begin to access this creative field? How do you work with it? Where do you draw on your strengths? How do you work with areas that maybe are not as strong? And begin to expand that creative flow in your life. So I talk about it from a really energetic perspective.
Yeah, I know the comment that not everybody thinks that they're creative, but they really are. That comment's been made a lot, but just in what you just shared, you can tell that it's not even just, oh, well, everybody does some sort of creativity, does art, does singing, plays their guitar, whatever that is. It's like it's just inherent in who we are, and that to me is kind of a relief. I've always thought of myself as creative, but I love that it's just in me, and it's just there for me to tap into whenever I want.
Well, and I have a book club that I've been with for 12 years, just a group of women that we've been meeting for years reading books, and they chose to read Wild Creative, which is fun because I get to actually read it as a person reading a book that I wrote. But
That's
I get
awesome.
to read it from you. And what was fun is just in the discussion that we had, one of the women said, well, I'm curious to read this because I'm not creative.
Wow.
And I think in any group you'll find people saying that. And I said, well, I can't wait to have this conversation with you then, because I bet that perspective will shift just as we delve into it. And what I find is that creativity, is often defined as maybe a skill at music or a skill at art, and so people have maybe turned off to that word. But if we understand it more as an energetic field, then we can start to look at the field dynamics of how we live day to day, how we approach different things from our relationships to our jobs, and we can start to work with the field dynamics of the creative field, and that's when it gets really fascinating.
So you keep mentioning the creative field and energy fields and things like that, and me being a person who's not very educated and all that, and perhaps many people who are listening, watching tonight or today are also similarly not really tapped into that. What would you recommend is how do we break into that?
Right, how do you begin? Well, first of all, I talk about some principles that I think are helpful to understand. One is just knowing maybe how we've tended to shape our lives has been more on linear pathways, and it has been more on responding to what happens. So just even the way that we do school and grades, People learn how to perform for something, to receive something. So rather than attuning to their own inner guidance, they're sort of learning this outer kind of external feedback loop, And so that's one thing that draws us away from our creativity. So have to be aware of that first and of that tendency. So we tend to shape our lives this way. Like maybe our professional lives shape our structure of our daily living. So we are responding to stimuli or to structures rather than creating it. So one thing is just know that and kind of notice that. Notice where that's true for you. And then begin to come back to your own center, the center of yourself. I think of this kind of like meditation. When you drop down into that deeper part of self. Sorry, oh no. Just a minute. Technical difficulties. I'm down in our office space, and I forget that there are phones and things like that. So dropping back into your own center. It's about coming to this place, and I think having some sort of practice that allows you to do that. Meditation is one. A yoga class is another. Taking a walk with mindfulness, meaning instead of just walking to get somewhere, you're walking with attention to presence, to being, to noticing what's happening in the flowers, to notice what's happening in the sky, to feeling what's happening in your body. Those simple practices of awareness can bring you back to this center point where you can start to begin to attune with your own creative flow. So that's why those practices are so important. If we're always responding to the external to-dos that we may have learned for a long time and how we learned how to go to school and whatnot, we never really come back to that own inner flow. And so you have to have some practice, and that's a good first place to begin, to come back to your center. And so I do this in several ways. When I walk my kids to school, I try to either on the way there or the way back at least have some time where I'm not just rushing, but I'm actually being present in my body. So I'm taking that practice that I already have to do anyway and making it more mindful. I also make a cup of tea for myself every day in the afternoon, and I promise that I will drink it before it's cold, because that forces me to be with myself and with that tea and not just thinking about other things, doing other things, and in that distracted way forgetting about being present. So these can be very simple, but those practices can begin to bring you back to that center, just even attuning and hearing yourself, so you can get back to that place where the creative current actually flows, which is in your own center.
Well, I love the fact that those two practices that you just stated, they're so simple, they're so straightforward. It's not like, meditation, I talked about this a couple of weeks ago, meditation to me can be a little bit intimidating sometimes, and, going to a yoga class, but just those little tiny practices that, to some extent, are already a part of your everyday life, just with a more mindful mindset. And that'll tap you into your creative flow, and then what do you recommend? What happens next? How do you really get into it?
Yes, well, so there's a couple ways. I talk about doing the micro and the macro. So the micro is those daily mindfulness practices that fit into your life. And the reason those are important is it touches you in every day, even when you're busy. It's like everybody's pretty busy. I hear that a lot. I feel that in my own life. I'm called on many levels to do many things every day, as mother in my healing practice, as a businesswoman, as a writer, and I know everyone else is feeling the same way. So there's the micro practice of just tuning in some way that fits in your busy life. But then there's the macro practice, which I think is essential as well, where you really do carve out creative space. And by that I mean doing something that brings passion or enlivens your own creative muse. This might be the bigger step of doing, having a garden, taking a cooking class, taking some sort of art class, a sculpture class, bead making, anything. Taking a bigger step towards that structure. So for me, a lot of this has been in healing arts classes. I've taken a lot of different healing arts classes, and those to me are one way that I make space for my bigger creative practice, because it usually is something where you're working with your hands, something that is creative in nature, where you're creating something. But I encourage people to both do what inspires them and move outside the box a little bit. Maybe take an African drumming class or do something wildly different. Stained glass. Just try something. But those bigger practices, or maybe it's something you've been putting on hold for a long time. You have a garden space. You've wanted to get to it, but you've been so busy doing other things. Schedule it in. Take 3 hours on a Saturday. Go out, get plants, mark it out. Take a bigger chunk of time.
Mm.
And that's the macro. And that's where you start really steering your ship in the direction you want to go. I mean, this is your creative life, right? And so if you're not running that creative essence, other things will run it for you. You know, work will run it for you, volunteer projects will run it for you, your children will run it for you. It goes on and on, you know. So there's the micro practice every day that kind of tunes you into that center point, maybe gives you that touch in that flow space. And I do receive guidance in that. I think when you do that routinely, sometimes I'll get a little nudge of like, remember, I was going to do this one thing that I really value, but I haven't been making time. And they might be linked to your macro. It might be the little nudge that says, hey, you wanted to create that garden. Now's the time. On Saturday, go take that time and make that space, you know, but they're linked. And we need both. We need the bird's eye view of the big, and then we need the on-the-ground day-to-day.
Is there a method? So a lot of the examples that you gave just then are things that one might deem extracurricular activities. And I'm curious, have you seen how creativity manifests like at work or
Yes.
in particular like at the office? Because when you get to the office, that linear thinking is so present.
Yes. You know what I think of when I think of that? I think of feng shui and clearing space and making it more enjoyable. So for me, whether it's in the home, I spend a couple hours every week at some point, and usually, you know, some of these things will pile up. But at my at my office and my home, where I'm tending space, and that to me is part of a creative practice. You know, you want to have a nice space to live in, to work in, and one of the key points of a creative practice is having a clear space to create. So I think taking time routinely, at least weekly, and go through your workspace or go through your home space, clear the clutter, put some things out that make you feel good, pictures, little totems, you know, hang some bells. I mean, really set the stage, put some plants in so you enjoy where you are, and then you find that you're more efficient, that the flow happens. That's, again, a way of looking at creativity around energy. The clearer the space, the better the energy flows. And what's interesting to me is I find that not only do in my workspace, I feel better there and my clients feel better there, but at home, I also notice when I do some clearing before my kids come home from school, when they come in, there's more peace and there's more ease, and they are responding to the energy. So that's a part of tending the field and making room for creative energy to flow.
It just gives a whole new perspective to cleaning, which is really nice.
It is. It's not a chore. And, you know, I think doing it when you feel inspired helps, not, you know, dragging yourself through the process, but kind of knowing that that's part, because I know that it's part of it. Sometimes things will accumulate for a little while, like in a particular cupboard, like right now our art space was getting really cluttered at home. And I just, you know, I didn't have time for that, didn't feel inspired. But then last night, for whatever reason, I had to go get some pencils or something out of there for a son who was working on a project. And I thought, now's the time. I know this is part of my overall agenda. And so I just, and when you do it when you feel inspired, it usually happens quickly. There's not a lot of emotional baggage. You're just, you're doing it, and then it feels good. Because you have clear space to create with, you know, clear space in whatever way.
Yeah, it just makes me think of my desk right now, and I have little knickknacks all over it, and I have papers everywhere, and it's just, and it's a rather large desk, and it's just covered in stuff, and I know exactly what you mean about those moments when you feel inspired. I don't know what happens, but I just get those moments where I'm just like, oh, this would be nice and easy to clean up right now. All of a sudden, it's easy, as opposed to that stack looks about as high as my head.
Yes. And I think that's another thing that I bring when I think about creative energy as, creativity as energetic, is there's seasons to all of these things. And so there's little mini seasons and there's macro seasons. And if you could trust the flow of that, you know, sometimes you have too much coming at you to really go and do the infrastructure piece. The infrastructure piece is the clearing. You know, maybe you're in your case, you know, you've got a lot of book projects, things coming through. And so it's coming at you, and maybe you don't have time for the infrastructure. So you just kind of manage it. But then right after that, you got some breathing room. You know that that's priority, and maybe that steps up and it feels easy, and you go ahead and you clear space. And so, you know, it's really working in this flow. I mean, when I'm in this flow, I feel like a creator in whatever I'm doing. You know, you're moving with the energy of space, and you're making things happen with that.
And I hear you speaking to something that a few of our other authors and filmmakers have touched on a little bit, but the idea that when things are coming at you, particularly at work, like, one assignment comes, another assignment comes, somebody else asks you for something else, it's just like coming at you. And you can have your perspective be that it's something coming at you, or you could switch your perspective and have it be like that creative space. Like you bring that creative space to whatever it is that is, coming at you, and it shifts it.
Yes. Well, and I think about a little bit like a martial art. It's like sometimes chi moves really fast. So when I think of coming at you, it's sort of like, it's chi moving. Oh. And so rather than, it doesn't have to be a battle, but you can sort of ground it, and you're moving quickly with that energy. You're giving it a little space here and a little space there. Maybe there isn't time to go down and really, clear the dojo, so to speak. You're just in the midst of your martial art test, it's like, but then you can tell I live with boys. But then you will get a chance to, and so it's like, it is all about that energetic experience. And sometimes I think it's okay to say, I'm needing to step out of this zone where I'm fastly receiving things into a more grounded zone. So you can move yourself out of these things. And part of it is just knowing that you are in charge of that creative flow. And I think that, again, is what you're hearing is what we're talking about is reaction. If we are in reaction mode constantly, it is very stressful on our systems, versus if we feel like we're in more resonance with things, like we're in sync, we're in flow. And if it's starting to feel out of flow, we can start to shift that, work with that, and how we're in. And it does make a big difference. And that's part of the creative field. I think me, I'm a pretty abundant creator, but there's a lot of energy skills I use for that, so that I hopefully don't feel too overwhelmed. I mean, certainly there are busy periods where I feel like seasons, robust harvest coming, but then it's important beyond that to take a good fallow time and let things sink in, let them find their place before you take on another season of whatever you're making.
As you're just saying that, it's important that you let it lie fallow for a little while, I realized that I have been in a season of abundance and lots of things, like creating lots and lots of things in my life for probably 2 or 3 years straight.
Yeah.
And I just recently, actually right after I got married, somehow everything just calmed down, and it was quiet for a period, and things are starting to ramp up again now. Fall usually does that, but having had that period of quiet and calm it gives me strength. It gives me, I don't know, it's like my feet to stand on going into this, as opposed to just kind of desperately flailing and trying to get everything completed.
Absolutely. Oh, I think if we have the linear pathway, we might panic a little bit in those still times, like I need to keep being busy,
Exactly.
And so it's helpful to think more like a harvest, like a farmer, that our creative energy that's where I talk about wild creative. I think about the earth energy always when I think of these things. It's like the earth is very abundant and creative, but it has equal fallow time to that outward creation. A tree that bears fruit will then kind of die back and go to sleep in the winter. And so if we think like that too, and I think everyone should look at what their natural times are of output and then rest. There are some natural seasonal ones that may impact us, but I know that my best output times are spring and fall. So that's when I teach my big classes, and that's when I have chosen to bring my books out, and they've kind of sort of naturally aligned with that, with spring and fall. And then summer and winter, I tend to go more inward, and for me it's family time. It's time when I'm kind of resting with my family, or playing, or traveling, or sitting by the fire, and I know that consciously, so I move with that, and it helps me be abundant but not depleted.
That makes so much sense.
Yeah.
And I've never thought about it like that before. Thank you. Well, one thing I just want to say is, like, using the martial arts metaphor along with the energy, I'm like, you could be like a creative ninja.
Totally. Absolutely.
I know, like, well, and I'm just thinking about, like, ninja martial arts people. They're so elegant in what they do, and while they have so much power behind it, you can see the flow in their body movements, and you can almost feel it as you watch them. And I like that mental image for myself.
Yeah. Well, I think, okay, so what is reminding me of when you're saying that out loud is that this, again, the creative essence to me is taking spirit, so something that is unformed, that's in the inspiration realm, that's in the pure potential realm, and you're bringing it into form and into something tangible, physical, something that can be seen or touched, creation. And that's, in martial arts, that's a lot of what they're doing. They're moving with the energy, and they're literally creating form. A lot of the expression of the martial art is form. They talk about form, but they're moving with the energy and the spirit and bringing that into form. So we can see that there's so many aspects of creativity where you are taking something and then moving it into form. And again, that's a way for people to think broader. How am I doing this in my life, or how do I want to do this? How do I want to bring spirit into form in these different ways?
Yeah, and I love expanding the idea of creativity where, like you said, it's like it's not just art and things like that. It's like it's creative living. It's really designing and creating your life. It's not just can I paint a picture or do a sculpture or draw.
Right. Well, and that's another. So you're pointing out another thing to me, and that's that it's not just the creation, but it's the engagement with the process. So when you're engaging the process, it's the energy of that and the exchange of that, and not just the creation, because the creation is an endpoint usually. But the creative living, it just can expand and flow and grow, and it might change when you're in one phase of your life and then shift towards another.
So I want to mention your books before I keep going, but I'm going to try and remember my thought. It probably won't go well, but we'll see. So today for this particular show, we have a great deal. It's incredible. We're actually offering all 3 of Tammy's books that I have right here. So Wild Feminine, which is a Silver Nautilus winner and known, I want to say, the world over, because it continues just to crop up everywhere, and people just seem to gravitate towards you because of its influence. And Mothering from Your Center, the 2nd book in the series, and then also, of course, Wild Creative, the newest book in the trio, as well as an audio download of meditation. So all of that, which is normally something like $49.95, it's very it's a lot of money. You get for 43% off your retail price, so it's $29.95, and it's a great deal. You get all 3 of these, and you'll get the audio download immediately. So go to www.beyondword.com/Kent, K-E-N-T, to grab that. And again, we'll have that available for a little while, so you run get it. And of course, again, if you have questions, be sure to use the Google Hangouts app and submit your questions. And subscribe to us on YouTube, follow us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter, all of those things. I can never get the verbs quite right. And of course, my thought has gone completely out of my mind. But the one thing that I'm always curious about is you did, and you talked about it a little bit, the idea of this wild theme. Wild is, to so many people, unorganized, and they don't want to go there. They want to just want to have that structure. But you're very assertively saying, no, this is wild. Let's go there.
Yes. Yeah. Well, maybe I should clarify too, because I think that's an important distinction. So when we go to a wild place, first of all, it's understanding that nature is inherently aligned in its design, especially in a place that has been undisturbed. So if you go to a place where near the ocean, or I think here around the Pacific Northwest, there's the Columbia Gorge where we have this beautiful river that comes through, or mountain space, particularly if you go where there hasn't been a lot of disturbance with development, you find that there is actually a real balance in that space. And we feel it when we go there. When you go to a beautiful place in nature, you feel that inner peace and that calmness. And I think of it as the best energy tune-up. If you just go to a wild place and you just are there, or you bring your children there, you see the effects of that. You feel the effects of that. It's so calming. It's so soothing. Well, it literally is, because that space is full of vibrant chi, and it's very balanced. It's very elemental. Nature has inherent balance designed to it. So that wildness, and even in the forces of nature in general, have a balance to them. Now, sometimes there is, this out of balance that we might think of with nature, but typically that's been where there's been some sort of development that has created an imbalance. Whether there's been a dam put in and it creates this out of balance in the river that then creates a flooding, or a fire where the suppression has happened of the fire, so the fire, when it does come through, is really big. So I'm talking about the balanced places in nature. But also, if you go to a place that's tended, you go to a beautiful garden where it's been tended, versus you go to a freeway and you feel the difference in that, the inherent wildness in that space with the plants and the animals and the birds that come through and the energy, there is an alignment there that you can feel in your body. I'll sometimes take my kids to, I'll point out, near the side of a road, feel how it feels a little chaotic or disrupted here, and then we'll be at a garden space, now feel the difference here. So I'm talking about that inherent organization in nature that we feel when we're there in that alignment. And we have this in our own bodies, and each of my books talk about different aspects of this. Wild Feminine really talks about that inherent beauty and organization in the female body and how to tap into it and how to use it and how to receive the medicine of it. There's beautiful medicine in every woman's body that is naturally there for her to soothe whatever she needs. But it's a matter of knowing how to access that, and I talk about that in Wild Feminine, which is also a very powerful creative space. This female body is where we come in. So that led into Mothering from Your Center, which is all about the beauty of the spirit door that comes through this space. And again, birth is powerfully wild. There's just this incredible energy that comes through in that process. And I talk about that energy and the potency of it, as well as how to receive the blessings and the medicine from it. I think because we're a little out of sync with nature and the wild, sometimes it feels scary or out of balance. And that's not the kind of wild I'm talking about. I'm talking about the beautiful alignment in nature that once we come back and attune ourselves to that place, we feel the peace within it. And so Wild Creative goes into the next aspect of that, which is really this energy field we have around our bodies where we are part of the divine creation that flows through all things. So when you look at a beautiful, vibrant space, when you go to a powerful edge of a mountain or a meadow where the flowers are blooming, or a huge tree, or the edge of the ocean, and you feel that beauty, it is in your own body, every single person. And that's the wild creative field that I want to wake up in people and just remind them of in whatever way I can, as well as teach them how to come back to that space. Even if they're living and working in cities, how can they tap into that and how can they access it? Because we can access it wherever we are. And there are tools to do that, and that's what I share in Wild Creative.
So could you share one tool in particular that people living in a city could use to access that, or even people who are just living in very full suburban areas?
Yeah, I think having some access to plants is helpful. Whether you have a plant in your home or you bring one into your office or you have a yard that you can step out to or you have a park that you can walk to, I think plants are the closest thing we have to touching this. I am not really a plant person in that I'm not great at keeping plants alive.
Me neither.
But I honor them. I love them. I keep mine simple, so I have two inside that I feel like, okay, I can manage these two. I like to go to my backyard, and then I'm also a big fan of living near a park, so we've always chosen to try to live near a park. But touching into that place where things are growing in the earth, that potency, that beauty, that's a simple way to feel that chi connection and to remind yourself that wherever you are, the earth is beneath your feet. It's there. Mm-hmm. And it's that contact with that wakes us back up to that place inside us that is inherently wild in the best way.
It's making me think, we were very lucky, Tammy, you came into the office on Monday and chatted with us and led us through a meditation, and one of the parts of it you told us to feel our feet in contact with the earth, and I was like, that's not the earth, it's the carpet, and then underneath that there's a foundation and la 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 la, and I let that go and really realized that it really is, it's the earth underneath me, and I just wonder if there are more people out there who have that experience where they feel completely disconnected from the earth, even if they're going and they're standing on grass.
Right. Yeah, part of it is waking up your sensory system again to feel the earth. It is a challenge because we live inside generally and maybe ride in cars and go into offices. It's easy to get disconnected. So it has to be a choice to remember to reconnect. But I think once you do that, it's deeply satisfying. If it's been going outside and sitting near the grass or near a tree, or you can, even if you're in the center of a city, there's usually little areas of park that you can get to, but even in your own office, looking out the window at the sky, there's different ways to connect with nature, and it's just a matter of, I think, almost like plugging into it. You just want to plug back into it because it is the ultimate chi source. We're living and breathing on it, and breathing with this air, and the more that we remember that, the better we can feed ourselves, if we remember that we are part of this. And I think it's also good to have a little bigger practice where you actually do go and sit next to a big tree, or you go and sit on the earth, or take your shoes off and touch the earth. First of all, because of all the electronics, I encourage my kids to do this because it actually grounds the energy of we pick up charge on our skin and our bodies from all the electronics we use. So if you're ever working at night or late on the computer, if you have access to the ground, if you're not living up in a tall apartment building, but if you can get outside, take your shoes off and put them on the ground, you will feel the charge release from your body. It's a really helpful thing. And when I was doing writing late at night for the books I've written when my kids were sleeping, I did this every time after writing in order to release the charge from my body. So there's lots of ways that Earth can help us even in our modern lives.
That's fascinating. I've always heard, don't look at screens or anything like that right before you go to sleep, because then you won't sleep and you'll have trouble. But I've never thought about it passing a charge to me, and
yeah. Cool. Yeah, try it. You'll see. I mean, it's like you can feel literally amped up and kind of awake, and you go out and you put your feet and take a couple big breaths and you sleep. That was one of my secrets for being able to write at night, because sometimes that was the only time I really had writing windows, when I had littler ones. But I wanted to sleep. And so if you go, I know a lot of people are trying to get work done after hours and they're on these screens. So it's a great way to balance your body, and try it. It's really fun. You'll see. It's just like, it's kind of like, it's almost like you feel like the water going down through a straw. It's just...
Well, and I honestly, I can't even remember the last time that I was barefoot on a patch of grass, or barefoot and I don't know, bark dust or anything like that. So I will do that tonight.
Yes, yeah.
Or so today at lunch.
Maybe talking about that is good information for people, because we really do need to get bare feet on the earth. And Qigong, people that do Qigong usually use a rope bottom sole, because rubber will block the connection. Most of our soles have the rubber. And so if you have that's moccasins are natural material, or rope bottom shoes are natural, because then you can have the connection better with the ground. So, or you can take off your shoes and have socks or bare feet. But it's very helpful and important for the body.
That's fantastic. Thank you. You've got lots of great little tips today.
Grass will go right down into the earth.
Awesome. Well, and one thing I definitely want to talk about, of course, is Wild Feminine. And Wild Feminine has just, it's such a pillar of the work that you do. And I've always been curious, just how did you get into this? How did you discover your interest in the feminine energy, and just discover the feminine energy just to begin with? And where did that come from?
I know, right. Yes, that's like a big question. But let me think, what's the heart of it? I think the heart of it is that I had the opportunity to sit with the female body. And it's a potent, powerful place. I had no idea, really, because in many ways we've lost touch a little bit with that. And so I'm a women's health physical therapist, for people that don't know. And that's a physical medicine practice for the female body that really should be more mainstream care. I'm very passionate about that, and I won't get off on a whole tangent, or I could talk forever about that. But it's just, we're really not taking care of the female body. And I think the female body shows sort of the care at the root place. I mean, this is where we come in, right? This is where we begin our lives. So if we're not caring for the female body, we're kind of not caring for all the things related to the female body, including children, the home, that more feminine space. And that's to the detriment of the whole. So what happened for me was, I was working as a women's health physical therapist, discovering this potent work just for myself. Like, wow, this exists. I didn't know this exists. I was thinking about midwifery, but I didn't really want to do births. I thought about medical school, but I didn't really want to do the whole medical field practice. And so I went physical therapy and found out there's this women's health physical therapy. I was fascinated. I mean, this really should be more well known. It's a physical medicine practice that can work with the alignment of the organs in the pelvic bowl. So helpful for so many things, so many diseases, but also fertility, but also just basic women's wellness. So because I was doing that, I got the opportunity to sit with women, kind of like a midwife, but not during birth. And so I really, very quickly, was fascinated by the energy there. And I have the ability to feel energy, so that was probably the other piece of this puzzle, is I just could feel this exquisite energy, but I had never been told about it or never read about it. So I started reading every book I could get my hands on about energy. And mostly what I found in the field of books was that people talked about the pelvic bowl as root chakra or second chakra, but that's it. So it's kind of general, You know, it wasn't like the in-depth that I wanted. So I felt that I needed to write my own. I wanted to understand. And so I started out looking at case studies. So based on the women that were coming to see me, I would study, okay, what happened in their bowl? What was the temperature? How did it feel? And what was I noticing? And what were they talking about? And what were their symptoms? And I literally started a long process of case studies that took me from 2001 to 2008 when I wrote my first copy of Wild Feminine. So 7 years. 7 years of really diligently studying what I've seen. And because it was so fascinating, I mean, it was just, I felt like I was waking up to my own energy field at the same time. It's like, okay, there's this potency, and no one told me about this, and I want to understand it, and I want to use it. I want to use it as a mother. I want to use it as a creative being. I want to understand it as a healer, and really just, and I think the way I would describe what I do is I have learned the language of the pelvic bowl. So it's like going to, maybe if you went to a remote tribe, that there were very few people that spoke the language anymore. And you think of the pelvic bowl like that. And I was there, and I began listening, and I began just sitting by the fire with them. And they started to talk to me, and it took me years to understand the words. But now I really understand the bowl, so much so that when women come in to see me, they often say, how did you know? That's the exact words that were going through my head, or that's a phrase that used to be said to me when I was a child. And that energy imprint is often there, so I can read it and translate it for them. And what I do is I sort of sit with them and translate what I'm hearing, what I'm seeing, so that they can hear it. And it usually resonates very deeply because I'm translating their bowl field for them. And so that's where Wild Feminine came from. I wrote it so that women could start to translate for themselves, so they could start to hear the left ovary field, which is more the feminine aspect, and the right ovary field, which is more the masculine aspect, and the womb, which is a place for children to come in, but also is a place a woman can go to receive information about anything she's making and doing, if she will come to that center point. And a lot of what I found is people had accumulated things in the bowl, so it's like, let's clear this space out, start fresh, and then begin cultivating the energy of creation there. And when we do that, it's like feng shui for the bowl, where now there's room for the creative vitality to make things, you know. And that's how I made my own practice and the work that I do, which I call holistic pelvic care, which is based on energy meditation and myofascial techniques that I now train practitioners from around the world. They come to Portland to train and find out about it through Wild Feminine usually. And so it's grown into this incredible thing, but it was also, I think, I was duly translating, but also receiving the information for my own self so that I could make what I wanted.
Absolutely. And I'm curious, has the medical world responded to what you've been doing? Have they integrated anything that you've discovered?
I think that's kind of one of my next pieces, is to partner with some of the holistic medicine practitioners that are around. I would say not yet, because the medical profession is sort of busy maybe reorganizing. You know, a lot of young doctors aren't very happy when after they go through all that work, which, I mean, work isn't even really the word. If they go through that soul-crushing process, I think they're pretty frustrated. A lot of the young doctors, you know, I hear talking. Lissa Rankin is one, Dr. Lissa Rankin, who kind of, you know, hated her OBGYN practice and the things that she was forced to do and the hours she was forced to work. And I sat with her when she came through Portland a couple years ago and was shocked to hear some of the stories she said. And she said, this is everybody. This is the experience. You know, driving to do surgery when she'd been up all night to do a surgery on someone, she could barely stay awake. You know, it's broken. So I don't think the medical community is busy sort of being disorganized, I think, and sort of breaking apart. And I think the young doctors are going to begin to reform it. And I think more and more people are going to holistic practices. They're going to understand that, see, in medical school, the options you learn mostly are surgery and pharmaceuticals. And so while those have their place, it's time to expand more into the energy, and physical medicine is a huge missing piece that the osteopaths used to use more. And I think people are going to come more to holistic techniques, not only because people are asking and because they're effective, but because the medical practitioners are exhausted and not really enjoying their experience of practicing medicine, you know. So that is coming probably of just more interface. What I've had instead is I have all these medical practitioners coming to me to train with me, so of varying backgrounds: chiropractors, naturopaths, MDs, nurses, naturopaths. You know, some are more holistic, some are less holistic, but the people drawn to this work are holistic. And there's just been tremendous, and midwives, tremendous excitement for this kind of medicine that is so whole and so satisfying, not only for the clients but for the healers that practice it.
There's such a theme. I was speaking with you, speaking with Don Goey last week, author of The End of Stress, speaking with James and Deborah Rouse the week earlier about their book, Think, Eat, Move, Thrive. There's this whole movement toward just loving the power of your body and really getting the power of your body and of your mind, and using that instead of, you know, diet pills or anti-anxiety meds or, you know, any sort of fertility drugs or whatever that is. But it's trusting the power of your body.
Right. Yeah, tapping into that. I know this is a similar theme, and I think the other thing too is empowering people rather than that. See, that linear pathway that isn't working so much anymore trained us not really to listen to our own authority. It's like, what do I need to get the grade? So you do that, and you kind of step out of your own authority and your own knowing. And the medical system has been much like that too, where you're asking someone else to give you information about your own body, you know. But it can be more of a team approach, and also we can come back to our own authority and understand that there is a potency and an aliveness in the body that we can interact with and that we can shift and use, and that has its own potency that I think has been underutilized in health. So, you know, so much of it is about coming back and learning to translate what your body's saying, being able to listen. And again, it comes back to that micro process of being in your center every day so you can hear, so you have a strong connection to that intuition, to that voice.
We really have been taught to not trust ourselves. It's so true. I will avoid going to the doctor because I don't want him to tell me something, even though I kind of already know it. I'll be like, if he doesn't say it, he, she, the doctor doesn't say it, then maybe it's not true, knowing all the time that it is.
Right.
Yeah, well, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Just coming back to that center point, you know, again, I'm really trying to keep my sons intact with that instead of losing it in school, because we still have this process we put our young people through, which mostly involves getting good grades and getting into college, and, you know, that sort of is still the main Western way of doing things. And there's some validity in that. You learn how to work hard, you learn how to process information, but it's really easy to lose because you get so distracted from yourself. You know, so it's just a key piece to either to find out where you've let go of it and come back into that center point again, and have practices that can help you tune back into that. Because sometimes, like when I work with people, they feel like, I don't even know where that went. I don't know where that center point went. You know, and so being willing to be with that awkwardness and that space where you kind of don't know, but it just takes time. You know, it's like learning a skill.
Yeah. Well, I want to mention one more time that we do have Tammy's books, all three of them all together, Wild Feminine, Mothering from Your Center, and Wild Creative, available for 43% off. So it's $29.95 plus the free audio download of meditation. And it is at www.beyondword.com/Kent. Be sure to go grab it as quickly as you can, because one of the things that I love more than anything, Tammy, is listening to you talk about your books, because for you they're not just books. It's like they're vessels of information that need to get out into the world so that people can understand, can get in touch with their center, can understand the power that they have, can find their healing energy, can find their creative energy, whatever it is that they need. So just I always admire you, and I love the way that you interact with your books and the people who do pick it up.
Thanks, Whitney. I think part of it is it's all tested and tried and true, because I work with people. You know, I've worked with thousands of women and increasingly men on the energy field, and so all these things are applied for me. I also, you know, I have a science background. I went to UC Berkeley, and I feel really strongly that it's important to ground some of the more spiritual alternative information and make it more applied, you know, and that's one of my passions, is so that these things are really, for me, these books are helping people apply these principles in their lives and understand not only how it works, but when it doesn't work, how do you how do you realign or shift things, or what can you do so that you come back more to that flow that's there and that potential. So, and they're, you know, used with so many people. When I write each of my books, I'm always testing everything. I'm working with it in my own life. I'm working with my sons and kind of seeing, you know, where to fine tune it so it's effective.
And you keep mentioning your sons, and we've heard little snippets of how you work with them to keep them in touch with their creative energy. And what's a tool, or what advice could you give parents who are trying to do that with their kids, who may have lost touch with that, or think that they aren't creative?
Mm-hmm. Oh gosh, so many things come to mind. I think, you know, one thing, probably the first, I think, most important thing is touch. And that might not be the first thing that comes to people's mind, but because me as a healer, I think people are not touched enough, you know, and when you're touched, like, you know, a touch on the head or a touch on the back or a little foot massage, there's this immediate sense of value. Someone cares about me, someone values me, I am valuable. And I think that's one of the most important things that parents can do, is have that. And sometimes people are naturally more touching their children when they're little. And as they grow, they can lose touch or feel kind of awkward. And so I've always had, you know, well, my boys, because I'm a healer, tend to just fold themselves into my arms a lot. But my teenager, it gets more awkward. And so I do say things like, you know, let me rub your shoulders a little bit. How about a little foot massage? How are you doing with that? You know, or if they have a place that's sore, I listen and I actually, let's put some cream on that. That daily touch really helps them come back to their bodies. And so if they're having stress, or they're starting to, you know, kids go through that phase where they start to feel like, am I good enough? Do my peers like me? Am I good enough in school? And that touch is so reassuring. It helps them come back to their center. Whenever I felt like they've gotten sort of stressed or far off too, I often will do a little meditation with them. And I know people can have different comfort levels with that. It helps if you have your own meditation practice before you start introducing it to your kids. But even just, you know, I'm going to invite you to close your eyes and just feel the center of your body. You are a bright star, and I felt you when you came into my body. And this can be for kids who are adopted too, so I don't want to just say birth children, but parents can always reflect the beauty of that being when they sit in that center place with them. So whether it's, you know, I felt you when you came into my body, and I know the strength and potential of who you are, or I felt you when you came into my arms, the strength and potential, and it's always there for you. I think it's important to reflect that to kids periodically, if not nightly, because there are a lot of things in life that will tell them they're not good enough, you know, especially when we get into this more achievement, if they play sports. You know, so like a simple way to do this, one of my sons does really love to express his creativity on the soccer field. So we support the passions our kids do, and that's probably a more obvious way to support their creativity. You know, one has music lessons, and he has piano and guitar, and wants to take voice lessons, so that's an obvious way. But sports are another way that kids express their passions. So our middle son is really into sports, so we support that. But in sports, you very quickly get that sort of delineation of who's good, who's not good, and he's playing at higher levels now. And so he came off the field last weekend, and he said, I had the worst game. I missed a penalty kick, you know, and he was really feeling down on himself. And so what I did was I put my arm around him, and I just said, I want you always to remember the beauty of who you are. Now, that's who I am, so I will say those kinds of things, and it may not be that exact thing that you say, but I think that touch and that reflection of you, the truth of who you are, is more than what you do. That I think you can never give that too much to kids. If it's a look, or it's an expression, or a touch, and if you do it routinely, then it doesn't feel awkward to do it. You know, so making it a habit and making that a reflection that you use, and then putting a little bit in those hard moments, like when my son came to me with that, you know, I feel pain for him, I feel sad for him, I wish he'd just make that darn kick, you know, but life isn't always like that, and I want him to know, again, what I just said, which is that the truth of who he is far beyond and far greater than what he does. And I always want them to remember that.
Well, and I hear it's very interesting, because out there in the world right now, and I've been speaking to lots of mothers around, I don't know why, but just recently I have been, there's the conflict with, you know, they want their kids to win at everything. They want their kids to always get the medal, always make the grade, all of that stuff. And then the reality is that they won't always make the grade. And I think a lot of parents fall into the habit of just being like, well, next time you will, or next time you'll do better, or it's, and that seems like more of that linear thinking.
It is. And so I think taking a step back and just thinking about what you say before you say it, we do always have this desire to make it better. But maybe instead of making it, when we do that, we're sort of implying that it wasn't good enough. That we kind of agree in a way.
Yeah.
And so sometimes just being with what is and reflecting the truth of them is deeper. I'll do this in different ways, but one is in my presence with them. But also, I shared with my son in that moment too. It was sort of another sort of soccer. He's going into his place where there's always going to be kids that are better. It's very competitive now. So my goal is to maintain his sense of self even as he goes through this. Mm-hmm. But I said to him, because he loves soccer, loves it. I said, when I was your age, I really wanted to be an author. It's interesting, right? I wanted to be a writer. So he's 11. And I said, but I started writing papers, and in school I didn't really get the feedback that I thought I would get if I was good enough to be a writer. Mm-hmm. So I just internalized that and decided I couldn't be a writer. And I said, isn't that ironic? Because I've written 3 books now, and I just want you to know that there's this external feedback you're going to get as you play soccer, but you love soccer, so keep loving that and love your participation in that. So I just think there's these teaching moments where we can expand our children's notion of creativity so they don't start shutting themselves down. Whenever kids are doing something they feel passionate about, they start running into roadblocks or judgments or pressures. They may start to shut it down. So being kind of alert and sort of, there's that ninja action again, just like help them move that little interference pattern out of the way, so they stay with it. And each child's different how you have to help them do that, but I think being present you can, and it's better to be with the discomfort a little bit than to try to make it better, because life is not always going to be easy.
Yeah, and it reminds me, a few weeks ago, I keep referring to previous shows because it's all tying together in my head. It's amazing. Yes. Well, we had an author on, Lorianne Thompson. She wrote Be a Changemaker, and one of the things that I said is that there's many problems or there's many projects out there in the world that I see that I won't take on because I'm worried I'm going to fail, or I'm worried that it won't happen. And I just noticed in what you're saying that I automatically make that mean something about me, and I'm not preserving my own sense of self. I start to be defined by the project or by the thing that I'm taking on. And so, yeah. do you have advice on how I cannot do that?
I do. I think first realizing that creating anything is an act of vulnerability. And to think about Brene Brown's beautiful work about vulnerability and being courageous, and I use that language in my home. I know that for myself. Whenever we're creating something beautiful, it's vulnerable, and vulnerable means that it doesn't always feel comfortable. It might feel a little raw. You might feel open. You might feel overexposed. That is inherent, and that's inherent with all the creations that I love, from every book I've written and brought out to the children that I've brought into this world. That there's the feeling of, am I good enough? Am I doing enough? Has there been enough external feedback? And the more comfortable we get with just who we are in the center, and we sort of realize we're walking into a vulnerable process, we might need to give a little extra self-love during that time. Okay, I know that I'm stretching here. That's part of being creative. And you don't want to stop being creative just because there's some uncomfortable feelings. So you have that little inner cheerleader, talking to you. Maybe it's your little inner ninja, going,
yes.
But that you're stepping in this place where you're maybe going to feel a little bit uncomfortable or a little bit raw, and so then you give yourself the support. And maybe it's talking to a friend. Maybe it's sharing it with a coworker. I talk with my husband a lot, like, wow, I'm really feeling vulnerable right now, but I know that's part of the process. I teach my kids about that. I say it's vulnerable. It's vulnerable to be on the soccer field. There's pressure there. There's real pressures. And I also say to myself and my kids, it took a lot of courage. It took a lot of courage for you to tell me that. It took a lot of courage for you to tell me how you were feeling. It took a lot of courage to stay on the field when you were losing or whatever, And so it's having those sort of inner dialogues so that you don't let that stop you. Because the other thing is remembering that whenever you did push through that, maybe it's looking back on past times, there's infinite reward. And the biggest reward is probably that you're letting your creative energy be expressed. So if you put it more on the expression and less on the creation, then you can sit with that, because that's always there.
That's fantastic. Okay, well, and I will, the image of my inner ninja is just gonna take over the world.
That's a good one for you.
Apparently, I wouldn't think so. I don't know why.
Probably
It's just
I'm
like,
reading your field, I think.
I think so. Well, and it's just it's exciting to engage with things out there in the world on my own terms,
Yes.
and not have to take whatever is given to me and I take on the emotions of things that are handed to me all the time. I don't know if I have a skill at reading people or whatever that is, but I can always kind of tell, like, when something is given to me, a project or something else, there's like a vibe around it. And then of course I'm just like, okay, I get it. That's the vibe. I'm just going to go with that.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Not necessarily helpful.
No, and I think it's good to have boundaries, because we're all interacting with each other, and so when you might be a particularly empathic person, which can be a gift. I certainly have that because I'm a healer. A lot of healers do, but I also know when to not. My whole intention is not to ever take it on. So I work with spirit to hold space for that. So it's not really me that's holding it. But even as you walk around in the world, you can feel different things. And so, knowing where your energetic space is and where someone else is. And you can always do a prayer around that, like a divine, may that energy be held and received where it's needed. May that person be blessed. May I be protected and blessed. And that sort of just puts some chi around all of it. So it's not really commingling because it doesn't really need to.
Yeah, and I've always, whenever that kind of energy would come toward me, I think in my mind, I've never actually thought this through, but it seems like I feel like I need to take it on in order to honor the other person, in order to say your feelings and the way that you've been dealing with this is valid, because, and I'm going to show that by doing it myself.
Yes. Yes, and I think that usually goes back to, if we, in Wild Creative, I talked a little bit about your early imprints with creativity. Usually those come through family structures. There's also a lot of messaging for young girls to be helpful, and so there's some gender issues there too, but it's good to recognize that's, again, in Wild Creative, I talk about your field of energy. Whenever you're engaging in creative projects in work or wherever, in home, in neighborhood, I do this a lot in school, it's good to know that you have choices in these things, and that sometimes we first go to our early imprints and we act in those, and so it's good awareness and sort of growing up your energy field to realize, like, oh, that's maybe how it was done in my family, or that's how I sort of learned you were supposed to. But I have so much choice in this. And again, using blessings whenever rather than taking it on, you could have a little great mother icon, like I have one behind you. I'm not sure who that is, but you just allow those great mother energies to receive you. That's like a mother energy that you're giving, that maybe you're over giving. So it's like that, you can give a blessing to that. May the great mother hold that. So you don't have to,
Okay. I can let that go. I think that would be. Yeah. Well, I just want to say we are almost at our hour, and I just want to say, Tammy, thank you so much for being on the show. This has been fantastic. I could talk to you for hours. It's great.
Yeah, we could just chat.
I know. Well, and just to remind everyone to run onto our website, www.beyondword.com/Kent, Kent, and grab the full series of Wild Feminine, Mothering from Your Center, and Wild Creative, so you can start learning about your own fields, whatever they may be, whatever you find there, and using these tools to give yourself the life of creativity and fulfillment that you really are looking for and that you really deserve. I'm really getting that too. Yes. And it's a huge discount, and they're great tools, and I hope everybody runs out and grabs them real quick. So again, Tammy, thank you so much for being on the show. And next week, we are going to have Sebastian Siegel. He is the producer and director of Awakening Worlds, and he will be talking kind of along the lines of what Tammy's talking about that deep connection and deep fulfillment in life, and how to bring those about. And so we're really looking forward to having a conversation with him. And Tammy, I hope you have a wonderful week, and I just love the work that you do, and have a fantastic time sharing all of this with everyone who you come in contact with.
Oh, thank you, Whitney. Thank you, and I hope that it's a benefit for all who pick them up. May they become their own wild creatives, because our world needs that creative energy to create the new structures to go forward.
Okay, we'll do it.
Great.
Thanks, Tammy.
Take care. Bye, Whitney.